friends. Welcome back to Mish Reads. Let's do a belated June reading wrap up, a Pride Month recap. I read a lot of great books this month, and I also started on my Spin the Wheel physical TBR challenge this month. Did I start it in June or did I start it in May? Pause. I started that in May. Okay. I started it in May, but I continued it into June, so any hoozles. The first week of June was crazy. I read 5 sci-fi novellas. I read All Systems Red, Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, Exit Strategy, and then Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. So for Murderbot, I thought these books were delightful, very funny, fast-paced. I loved the world, I loved the characters. But last summer I did read All Systems Red and I gave it like a 2.5, 3 stars because I didn't love the ending of that first novella and I didn't feel compelled to continue. This summer, because I wasn't quite sure how much of the novellas the first season of Murderbot was actually going to cover, I went ahead and read a bunch more of them. And I actually think that they're a lot more fun if you read them back to back because you get more satisfying updates on the plot and the characters if you read them back to back. So definitely a fun time. I've paused. I read all the way through, ended up reading through Network Effect this month, and I still really liked it, but I needed a break. It was a bit too much Murderbot. And then Murder by Memory. This one is really quick. It's only a 2-hour audiobook. But this is a sapphic sci-fi novella. We have a detective who wakes up in a body that is not hers, and she has to figure out why and how herself and the woman whose body she was put in, were murdered. So very cute, very cozy. I was utterly delighted by this main character because she gets really flustered by like these beautiful hot women that she ends up interacting with, and I found that so relatable and charming. And then turns out that she's a knitter, and I'm a knitter. Knitting in space, I love it. Then for my Grandma's Bookshelf series, I started Cold Hearted Rake by Lisa Kleypas. This was my first ever Lisa Kleypas, and it was delightful. However, it did solidify. I now have a running theory that regardless of author, because I did read the first book in a series by Tessa Dare as well, for these interconnected standalone historical romances, the first book sometimes is one of the weaker books because it is spending maybe 60% of the time focusing on the main couple, and then the other 40% focusing on building the family, the other characters, and setting up any of the overarching plot lines that will be carried through the series. So for me, this was a 3 stars. Nothing wrong with it, and I actually really loved seeing this couple in the sequel, but just didn't super blow me away, and I found myself more drawn to other characters. So that's my 2 cents on that. Then I read Chlorine by Jade Song. This was weird and twisted and gory and very triggering if you have struggles with self-harm, or if you've ever experienced a power imbalance with like a coach or a teacher or something where you were being sexually harassed but they weren't doing anything quote unquote bad. Basically that really icky, awful situation that so many young teens and particularly young girls find themselves in, where, like, he's only touching my shoulder or whatever, and you feel like you can't complain about it because it's not actually wrong, but then you grow up and you become an adult and you're like, no, that is super, super wrong. So if any of that is a trigger, and then there's some body horror. If any of that is a trigger, then stay away from this one. But the angsty yearning between our main character and another girl, I felt like was so real and so raw. And this was just a really weird but really thought-provoking book, and I liked it a lot. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be when I put it on my TBR sometime last year, but I'm really happy I read it, and I would recommend it to certain people. Then I started a journey that has changed who I am as a person. I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and I gave this a 4.25 or 4.5. I don't know. I can't decide. I love this so much. I love Robin Hobb's writing. I love her character work. I never used to identify myself as a character-driven reader because I don't think I'd ever truly read a book that was super, super heavily character-driven. But now that I have, oh my God, it makes me notice the shallowness of certain characters in other books. It makes that so much more apparent now that I've read what is a masterclass in character-driven work. And I think the only reason I would not give this a 5 stars is purely just because I'm being nitpicky and I really could give all of Robin Hobb's books so far that I've read 5 stars. But I think where people will struggle with this one is it does feel a little bit slow at times and there's not quite enough world building for me to understand fully where we are and what we're doing, but I know why she's doing it, and so I'm okay with it. But then, yeah, just in comparison with the other ones, this one doesn't stand out quite as strongly. But I love it, I love it, I love it, and I can't wait to do a reread because I love it. Did I mention that I loved it? Then I read Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. This was a fun time. I gave this a 4 stars, and I think what I struggle with is sometimes with these novellas, I just want them to be longer books. I want them to be fully fleshed out books. I read The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Jelly Clark, and I could have read an entire series based off of that idea. And so it's not to say that these aren't incredibly written novellas. It's just that me as a reader, to my tastes, I just want to spend more time with this world. But I actually read this before I saw Sinners, and I saw a lot of people shout out this book. If you liked Sinners, read this. And it actually kind of helped that I had read it beforehand because there was some terminology like hates and some of that cultural reference points that made it helpful to then catch those things in Sinners, but loved it. And it was funny. And I will now read anything by P. Jelly Clark because I really, really like his writing style. Then I read Marrying Winterborn by Lisa Kleypas. Whew, this one was a 4.5. This was really good. I loved, what's her name? Helen. I loved Reese and Helen. I said this in my shorts review, but Helen at first seems like a boring, weak wallflower. And then you get in her head and you realize how smart and independent she is and how driven she is, how she knows what she wants, she knows who she is, and she's just introverted. And so she is our quiet, introverted girly who just wants to bang her hot husband and take care of her flowers. And what more can a girl want? Then I finished Network Effect. I enjoyed, this is the first full-length novel. We brought back a character that we had seen in one of the novellas that has become my favorite character in the series, so I loved that. And the stakes felt higher, it felt a little bit less cozy and cutesy and a lot more serious. And yeah, just loved it. Then I listened to King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby. This was really, really good. It doesn't break my top 2 by him, but it was still solid. It was a 4.25 stars for me. And he's an auto read author. I will say My Darkest Prayer feels like a first book. It is a first book. So I would actually read some of his other stuff before you read My Darkest Prayer if you want to like read his whole backlog, because if you read My Darkest Prayer and you're like me, maybe that one won't do it for you as much and you won't want to continue. So save that one for later. Then I listened to Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle, and I really want to read more by Chuck Tingle because this was great. It was funny and smart and tackled issues of queerness in relation to religion, and it had a really satisfying ending. And so I think it'll be a really cool hell yeah moment if you have some religious trauma, but also keep an eye out if you have religious trauma because there's a lot of it in here, and you do have to read about it. So just be aware. Then my wheel picked Mine Till Midnight by Lisa Kleypas. This is another first book in a series by her. This is a solid 3 stars. This one tackled some really interesting issues of like grief and trauma in our main character. She lost her best friend, and that best friend was also engaged to her brother. So it makes me intrigued to see the brother's character arc and his character journey, because in this one he's honestly a piece of shit. And so I'm interested to see like if Lisa Kleypas can convince me to fall in love with that main character later on in the series. But Yep, it's a solid start to a series. It was fun, it was romantic, but there was a lot more effort, I think, put into building the whole family than there was into just prioritizing the main couple. And so to me, that leads for a bit of an unbalanced reading experience. Then I read A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. And oh my God, this book had me giggling and kicking my feet. It was so fun. It was so sweet. Um, I've been telling people that it feels like Schitt's Creek in that the only person who is stressed about her being trans is Viola. She's the only one. That's her name, right? Yes, Viola. I started jabbing myself. The only person who's super, super stressed about that is her. Her friends are accepting, her family is accepting, um, her love interest is accepting, and she's the one who's like, we couldn't possibly be together because people will wonder like why we're not having kids and what's wrong with me and like blah 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 blah. And so if you've read any or listened to any interviews about Schitt's Creek, Dan Levy talks about how they wanted obviously there to be certain conflicts in the book, but he wanted his characters to be free from homophobia. He wanted that to be not a thing that was a boundary or an obstacle for the characters in that show to go through. And it leaves, it makes for such a cozy and happy and safe feeling world, just in the sense that, yes, there are still scary things that happen. Yes, there's conflict, but like, I was kind of holding my breath, spoiler alert, but I was kind of holding my breath, waiting for her to get outed or for something like that, something like around her identity to be the big problem in the book, and it wasn't. And so it was just really nice, and it was just a safe, cozy romance. The only reason I honestly didn't give it 5 stars is because it really dragged in the middle there. They spend a lot of time at court for the main male character's sister, and I found that really boring. But I will absolutely read more by Alexis Hall. Her writing is beautiful, and they do an incredible job at building these characters and giving them such distinct voices. The fact that they then obviously advocated for a trans narrator to bring this book to life, just loved it. Really, really enjoyed it and would highly recommend. Yeah, I just loved it. Then we read about some toxic lesbian vampires. This was my first V.E. Schwab. I read it in about 2 days. I immersion read this, so I listened to the audiobook while I read it, and fully admitting that the reason I did that is because I found out that the narrator is the actress who plays Caitlin in Arcane, and I love Caitlin. So, yeah, that was really fun. But I love this so much. This was a 5 star for me. This is another one where my emotional enjoyment and personal enjoyment sort of supersedes any sort of like structural narrative, like writing style critiques I may have, because I understand the complaints that some people have. Some people think that it's slow at times, that it feels unbalanced, that not each character is like strongly enough written. Like I hear all those complaints and I'm just like, yeah, cool, great. It's still a 5 star book for me. So loved it, loved it, loved it. Then I read Detransition Baby. This brought me a lot of joy because my wheel picked it during Pride Month, and this is a book about 2 trans individuals and the ways that they engage with and experience their identities in their lives and how they handle an unexpected pregnancy. And this book was funny and aching and complicated, and like these characters are nowhere near perfect, and I like reading about messy characters. I like reading about people who feel really, really real. And even though these people make decisions that were frustrating or hurtful or like quote unquote bad, that made them feel very real and very grounded. And I was just really grateful that I read from a perspective that was so different from mine. I think that's so, so important. And that's part of why I think we're here. I think we need to be doing this. So definitely highly recommend that. Then I read One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. This is an interconnected standalone book to Every Summer After, and I gave Every Summer After a 3 stars, I think for 2 reasons. I had issues with the ending. I won't give spoilers necessarily, but there's decisions the characters make that I feel would have been valid of a decision or a mistake to make had a little bit more time passed. I felt like the characters made a very petulant and annoying decision after only a couple of weeks of conflict. And so that part I was annoyed by. I think also the other problem is I had just read Love and Other Words, and those books are very, very, very similar. And so if you read one or the other, you might not like the other one as much. But this one I loved. This was 5 stars. The side characters were fully fleshed out. They were not just set dressing. The characters themselves went on really believable character journeys. I felt both of them had character journeys that like were fully explored and fleshed out. And then I actually believed that these two would make it, that they would actually stay a couple. And I really relate to Alice. She's such a people pleaser, and I'm a people pleaser. And so I just really loved Alice. And then the last book I finished in June was Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This was incredible. It was a great follow-up to Assassin's Apprentice. We see so much more growth with Fitz, and we see just how naive he is. And it started to click for me that the reason that the world building didn't feel as strong is because we are experiencing everything through the eyes of Fitz, and we are seeing the world through that extremely biased lens, because in this book he's only like 16 or 17, and so he thinks he's hot shit, he thinks he knows what's going on, he thinks he can make the right decisions to fix the things going on around him, and he's constantly messing things up because he's a child and because he's naive and entitled. And once you realize that, it makes sense why you're sort of cut off from the rest of the world, because Fitz is not exposed to the rest of the world. He's still figuring everything out. The only complaint I would really have for this is maybe some pacing problems. A lot of the action happens in the last like 100 or so pages, and a lot of the stuff on the beginning part feels a little bit slow, feels a little bit repetitive. Like he wakes up, he trains, he does this, he goes back, he does this, he sees this person, hangs out. But we do finally meet Night Eyes. So we have to love the book because of that. But yeah, that is my 19 books for June. I'm a mom and I do work full time. And what I've found is in the summer, just having a couple chunks of time back to myself, not doing like drop-offs or pickups, and then even not going into the office as much, I have just a little bit more time to read, and it really pays off, and it really helps me get through a lot more books. So even though I hate it when it's hot, I love the summer because I can read more. And if that's not the most introverted thing you've ever heard, then I don't know what is. So anyways, what was your best book of June? Did you read any good books for Pride? I would love to hear it and chat with you guys in the comments. But for now, I will see you in the next one. Bye!